The first question we're starting off with is, please tell us about the situation of gender ideology in your country.
So it's very complicated in the US, as in many other places, as was discussed during last week's call. In part, it's complicated because we have our federal government and we also have 50 states plus the District of Columbia. So we have federally, we have something called the Equality Act, which is very similar to the recent proposed amendments to the GRA in the UK, which I understand have been postponed for now. But the Equality Act would essentially replace sex with gender identity throughout all of United States civil rights laws. We think that that probably will not pass anytime soon, so that's good. We also have at the federal level before the US Supreme Court the case called Harris, which would do the same thing potentially that the Equality Act would do, which is to say replace sex with gender identity for purposes of interpreting our federal laws. And we anticipate a decision in that case anytime between now and June. And Women's Liberation Front filed a brief in that case, arguing that sex means exactly what we all know it means, and that women and girls are a discrete legal category worthy of civil rights protection. But we have no way of anticipating what the Supreme Court is going to decide in that case. So those are the two biggest things probably at the federal level, but even more complicated is what's going on in all 50 states, where state legislatures are replacing sex with gender identity for purposes of driver's licenses, birth certificates, things like that. And we have a number of bills in US states that would allow for the transing of kids. We have some bills in US states that would prohibit that. Some recent developments, which are very positive, are that the state of Idaho passed two laws, one which would preserve women's sports for women and girls, and one which would ensure that birth certificates reflect sex. So those are great developments. Unfortunately, both are being challenged legally in the courts, and so we're preparing to fight that legal battle. And there are other cases in US states where Wolf is also prepared to weigh in on the topic of the problem of replacing sex with gender identity. There's a case that's coming up in Ohio where a man was fired from his job at a public university because there was a student who's male who insisted on being referred to as Miss or Ms. and insisted on using she, her pronouns, and the professor refused to do so, and he was disciplined for that. So he sued, and he lost his case, and he's appealing. So there's a lot going on throughout all 50 states and at the federal level, and it's just a massive and somewhat overwhelming challenge. And women in the US are doing our best to make sure that sex means sex and that women and girls are protected as a discrete legal category.
We're called progressive, but I think we're regressive in very many ways. So we have a law that allows people to change gender on the basis of a doctor's declaration. So you don't have to have an operation to become another gender than your sex. I don't know how to say it. So that's in since 2014, but now there's the state secretary wants to make a new law which will be self-identification, and we're trying to stop that, but we are with a very small group because most feminists or women that call themselves feminists in the Netherlands say trans women are women. So we have quite a hard battle to fight here, and we are with a very small group, but we're doing our very best to influence politicians to stop this law. So that's one thing. The other thing is there's a human rights committee. They said all men should get an invitation for the feminine screening. We're out of our minds because of the ridiculousness of these decisions, and we're trying to fight them, but we're doing our best.
It's really good to hear from you because when we were starting the Women's Human Rights Campaign about a year and a half ago, we didn't have any contacts in the Netherlands. And those of us who've been involved in the anti-prostitution and also the pornography issues, the struggle against them, have found it very difficult. The Netherlands is known to be a very tricky country.
In Germany, we have, for a long time, I heard nothing politically. There has been a law which was actually, or still exists, which is for intersex people. So if they go to their doctor saying, I'm not fit in my gender, so it would be easily to change even the birth certificate. That was used as a loophole for a very long time, also for any transgender person, although it was not designed for that. There have been in various brochures for doctors been a call out not to do that anymore. How much that has been is still in practice or not, I cannot say. Then we have, which is quite urgent, next week on Thursday, we have a change for psychologists, which means they are forced to be affirmative. If someone is gender non-conforming, they must confirm them in their dysphoria and help them to become the new gender, whatever that is. So that's a quite urgent change. It comes under the disguise of the conversion therapy, although to confirm someone in their new gender from our point of view as a group is actually a form of conversion therapy. So that's the legal situation. And coming summer, I think it has been postponed a bit, is a change in law. So self-ID shall officially be possible for any kind of trans ID person. And when I first moved back from the UK to Germany, there was absolutely nothing and I felt very deserted. I keep looking out. It just wasn't a subject whatsoever.
When was that?
That was 2014, 2015. And then I attended groups which were long-standing feminist groups, where they even which they do exist for like 30 plus years, which were women only, where even the delivery these had to be done by women. They were very strict about that all my life, and they became all woke and affirmative and had men involved there as well, which came for me as a shock and was far from relaxing. So I then started to look for other women, and I started to look for, and I started push Emma, which is one of the most long-standing feminist magazines in Germany. And I did publish an article with the Störenfrieders. And those were the few ones which would be outspoken against the idea of trans women are women. Emma now published in January a long chapter about the trans issue, and had, according to their own records, they said they had the worst shitstorm in the 40 years of their history for doing so. They didn't back down, quite the opposite. The following edition, they had yet another article about the subject, so good on them. Majority of these so-called feminist groups, however, are very inclusive, that go so far that the Dyke March in Munich last year was led by a bloke called Tessa Gensera, who's basically a man in a wig because he's a lesbian now and can talk about the Dyke March. The lesbian spring has become more and more a kind of group which used to be just lesbians, as it says in the title, and it's now all kinds of blue-haired people Some of them are even lesbians.